Hello, good evening, everyone. Good morning to you, speakers from abroad, the US, Europe, Latin America, and maybe I mix some other countries. Welcome here for this first video online conference on World Anti-Crisis Plan. My name is Mark Huzen. I am the Executive Director of the Reinventing Bretton Woods. I think I met all of you 1 year ago here in Astana for the first anti-crisis conference that was organized by the Eurasia Club of Economic Science, G Global, and the United Nations. We are all here today and tonight for us to discuss something important. Remember, 1 year ago when we met in Astana, we all talked about financial crisis, Eurozone crisis. And what the difference in May, when for the first time we are talking about reviving growth and resilience in the global economy. So here we have here in Astana tonight with me Murat Karim-Maskov, who is the president of the Eurasian Club of Economic Scientists. Good evening.
Good evening, thank you.
And also our colleague Alisha Kamjin, who has been instrumental in thinking and putting together this anti-crisis initiative in terms of writings. And we are all of you over there at Skype. You know, this is a new way of doing conferences. Sometimes we cannot meet face-to-face, but we can meet through video, which is quite important and quite practical. I'm here as a moderator to try to be very concrete tonight. We laid out a plan, we laid out some proposal. Hopefully, we will get from you a lot of comments, a lot of criticism, but of course, very concrete outcome that at the end, our goal will be to be able to gather that information, and with that information analysis, we can revise this initiative and this draft plan in order to circulate to other experts. And from that, hopefully, when you are going to come to Astana on May 21st, May 23rd, not only to visit the country, but also to be able to contribute to an important initiative that I believe is important at a time where we face still major challenges in the global financial system. So, before I give you and I moderate these interesting discussions today, and I will try to be very concrete, as I said before, why don't I give the floor to Karim to give us just a little background. Why Kazakhstan did this initiative on anti-crisis at a time where people will argue, well, which financial crisis are we talking about? And at the end, how can this project and this initiative can come up with some very good and concrete proposal in order to reduce the frequency and the severity of financial crises that we have occurred and we have been happening and witnessing over the last 20 years. Karim, please.
Thank you. Now, Kazakhstan is a part of the global economy, is affected by all its processes in macro and micro processes and levels. And of course, Kazakhstan, as all countries around the world, will not be insured by the advanced economies, monetary policy or fiscal consolidations. And I think that is why we think that it is very, very important to follow up discussions on reviving global economic growth, to follow up World Anti-Crisis Conference and events. And we believe that we can develop recommendations and good proposals on economic development for both developed and developing countries around the world. And we will, of course, enrich legitimacy of global governance. And Kazakhstan almost for more than 20 last years after his independence, being as bridge between Asia and Europe, and Kazakhstan is active partner and a member of international organizations as the United Nations and of course others international and financial institutions around the world. And for the years of independence, Kazakhstan, you know that Kazakhstan initiated a lot of proposals, a lot of ideas, and some of this initiative recognized by world community. All this initiative aims to address global challenges facing the world. This includes also the creation of Eurasian Union as well as Congress of World and Traditional Religions, Astana Economic Forum, Eurasian Economic Club of Scientists, World Anti-Crisis Conference, and others proposals and ideas. Moreover, giving up fourth nuclear arsenal in the world, Kazakhstan is a leader of the nuclear-free movement and security. All these proposals are closely interrelated with last initiative of our president to radically expand of number of participants to find solutions to the world economic crisis in a global format. And of course, it's important to realize that global challenges as world economic crisis need and require not separate action but global participations, where each country in the world have possibility to enrich global dialogue. And as I said earlier, Kazakhstan initiated a number of international projects, and one of the important among them is the creation of Eurasian Economic Club of Scientists, which unites representatives from more than 130 countries around the world, major international organizations and financial institutions. And now we have developed World Anti-Crisis Plan project for United Nations, and we are going to host World Anti-Crisis Conference in this year in Astana.
Thank you. Well, let me try to follow up with you, and maybe as a starting point, maybe I call your name, just make a quick introduction of who you are, and after I will give you the floor to kick off the discussions. So why don't I start with Sergei Stanovkin, please. Sergei, can you introduce yourself to the team and to the people on Skype also? You are good morning, good afternoon, but at least I say hello to you from Astana.
Actually, I'm very grateful to Kazakhstan and to Astana Economic Forum in particular for bringing this subject to life. And because many countries, they do think about themselves. Some of them, they think about neighbors, and not everybody is prepared to think about global issues. And not just to think, but to try to solve them. This is, I think, big duty and big responsibility.
Very happy to participate in this conference, but I would like to hear what other people have to say to see if I can add something useful.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Dankovic, good morning or good evening, I'm not sure.
Good morning. I'm in Washington, and Mr. Cavallo, if it would be a wonderful pleasure to meet for coffee, since you're visiting Washington. So, but we can maybe communicate offline. I've been working in Kazakhstan since 1993 on fiscal issues, and I think what is extraordinarily important about this Astana Economic Forum initiative is the leading role that Kazakhstan can play as an example to other non-OECD countries. I'm very, very concerned about initiatives like this BEPS, base earning in profit shifting, and other initiatives that are being driven by Paris, London, and Washington that do not necessarily reflect the economic, cultural, and societal realities of developing countries and really advancing countries such as Kazakhstan. And I think Kazakhstan can show the way. Things like how you can have a balance between extractive industries and successful development. Things about how you can. So I'll stop there, but I think this is.
I'll get back to you, please. Thank you. Mr. Faramazi.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. Good morning, sorry. Yeah. So just quickly to introduce yourself for the other member of Skype, and after I'll get back to you for more comments on the overall anti-crisis planning.
Well, as some of you know that I've been in Kazakhstan in April will be for 21 years, and I've been with International Herald Tribune, which now the name is changed to International New York Times. And economy, politics has been my hobby for the many, many years from very youth when I was demonstrating against Vietnam War in San Francisco at the age of 18. So I continued with what is going on around the world. And I do have some comments about the report that has been prepared that is fascinating, but I would really like to add some comments on those. I don't know, do you want me to do it now or you would?
Philip. Oh, sorry, Philip Nobel. Yes. I'm sorry, I forgot you. Please, if you can introduce yourself.
Yes, I've been to Kazakhstan only last year, and it was quite an experience. I'm Philip Nobel. I've been working with crisis economics for a number of years.
Yes.
Mostly in microeconomics, though. But I would say, as to this initiative, I think that it is. I'm very happy that it is happening, as it is something that we all need, and I'm very honored to be able to, if I can add something to this conference, to this happening, I'm more than happy to do so.
Very grateful. So let me try quickly to ask our colleague here in the studio, Alisha Kamjim, who have been putting together this first draft with, of course, the support of different experts in different countries, with academics and private sector, and the team here at Eurasia. Alisha, can you give us a flavor? And clearly, what is the main message about this anti-crisis proposal? We have to summarize, to tell us, okay, in 2 months, we are coming to meet in Astana. What are we going to say to policymakers who are going to come for this conference? What do we want to say? What is the main message? And after we kick off the discussions, please.
Thank you. As you can see, the main message of this plan is simply achieving sustainable development of the global economy. There are a lot of issues actually, starting with the global economic governance, financial governance, and even social development and Millennium Development Goals. We have tried hard to put it all together and basically write the guidelines for governments and government officials to maybe follow or just to listen to them and perhaps implement them to achieve economic growth.
Thank you. Well, here we are, like the main message, we need to get growth. That's clear, the main message, and we need to prevent secular stagnations. And there are some medium-term issues that are so critical that has been discussed for a long time. The issue of global governance, reform of the IMF, reform of the Bretton Woods institutions, and reform of the international monetary system. And of course, a more medium challenge to deal with poverty. Domingo, if I can start with you, if you read that paper, what is your overall opinion about it? And also any criticism, and also do we miss something? What are the shortcomings, and what do you believe should be the main message for this anti-crisis conference in 2 months? Domingo.
Yes, I read it carefully and I like it in general, but I think there are some emphases which are not the most appropriate. When talking about the possibility of coordinating national efforts to avoid crisis and push growth up all over the world. The emphasis is put in monetary and financial issues, mainly associated with cross-border capital movements. And I think that the emphasis should be put in what kind of fiscal policies and domestic policies the countries should implement. For example, it would be advisable that all the countries that have current account surpluses, the main example is, for example, Germany, they should be strongly advised to implement expansionary fiscal policies and to try to be a larger market for the rest of the world, because they are having a big trade surplus and a big current account surplus. You know, the countries that have should, of course, try to implement domestic structural reforms that will encourage competitiveness, but at the same time, they cannot have expansionary fiscal policies, because that would aggravate their current account deficit. So I think that coordination of fiscal policies and national efforts to improve the assignment of resources within each economy to increase productivity is key for getting sustainable growth. Of course, international capital movements should help this process, and it is clear that short-term international capital movements, which depend very much on monetary policies in the main countries, may end up being destabilizing. But I think that one could not expect, let's say, the United States or Europe to implement monetary policies which are appropriate for the global economy. For sure, they will emphasize the kind of monetary policies that are good for their national economies. No? So I think in terms of preventing crisis and growing fast, the emphasis should be put in following some rules about fiscal policies and structural policies in the national economies.
Thank you, Domingo. We'll get back to you on that. Can I ask Mr. Faramarzi, your view, your opinion, your criticism based on that document?
Well, I really don't have criticism of the document. This has been very well done. However, there are aspects of it that should be really worked on. For instance, vocational training and skill training generally. I don't know how many of you have seen the OECD report that came out a few months ago about the educational system around the world. And in fact, when you really go look at that, you see, for instance, United States is losing its the really top country in education is falling down because they do not have the graduates come out with basically academic knowledge, but no skilled. They have no skill to work with. And, the countries such as Scandinavian countries that put emphasis on skill training are really coming up on the top of the list. Like Finland is the first one evaluated as the country that is doing fantastic job in education, and other Scandinavian countries as well. Most of the youth, age of 15, 16, 17, are actually opting for the vocational training and going to vocational training, because that increases the possibility of the job for the youth. And basically, one should really look at the corporate needs around the world. What do they need? Do they need even if accountant is sort of graduating as an accountant, they really have to have the knowledge to be able to perform in the corporation. In fact, 2 weeks ago in the Kemep University in Kazakhstan, they invited me to be on the Council of Advisory Board in the university, and they invited some of the top companies' leadership into that meeting. And basically, the main complaints that they had, the graduates that they hire in these companies absolutely have they cannot serve the need of the companies. This is being in communication, this is being in the techniques, modern techniques that are being used. They have no knowledge. So I really think in this report, you should put more emphasis in the needs. If we really want to have the employment for the youth and prevent poverty, more poverty in future, we have to train our youth, and not only in a Scandinavian countries, around the whole world, so they will be able to serve development basically in the world. This is one comment, but I have other comments that as we go along, I can talk about.
I get back to you for further comment. Why don't I ask Philippe Nobel, please, your comments on the overall paper.
Well, I thought the paper was very well thought. It was very well put. However, I would like to put some more emphasis on the unemployment sector, which is, as we know, a global threat. I don't have to tell you, you're very well aware of that each year the unemployment rates, they grow at a steady pace, unless for some countries. But I can see here in France, for example, I believe that the latest figures are somewhere around 10 or 12%, which is a difference from last year with some horrendous figures. So I very much agree with the previous speaker as to the education of the youth, but I would also like to emphasize on the unemployment, because I mean we can all start talking about, I don't know, microloans. We can talk about encouraging global trade and so forth. We're not going to solve anything until people realize what a global threat this is. And I think this, well, if you ask my humble advice, this must be among the top questions. But so that is my suggestion.
Okay, thank you. So we have already some discussions and some thinking related to fiscal policies. We have the need for vocational training, and one of the main priorities is really unemployment. What is the best way to deal with unemployment? As we said, Europe, and particularly France and other countries, unemployment for young people is still very high. So why don't we continue, and after we will continue the debate. Please, let me go to my list. Sergey.
Obviously, I agree with everybody regarding quality of the papers. They're very high. And just what I'd like to know, to add, if possible, is about, obviously, communications. because we were talking about cross-border capital flow, and it's extremely important. And I think that cross-border communication is extremely important as well. And we have mentioned, and in the paper it says that the need is for the spreading the best practices. And we do need to communicate with the world and all nations, and we need to promote and to support national and international programs. But all this is possible only with the help of the highest quality communication. What I mean is not just communication among the experts, but we do need to involve people, the nations, and sometimes it's difficult without TV, even with the help of internet, sometimes it's not possible. And probably you notice that in many cases, we do not have, I'm talking about different countries, developed, emerging markets, African countries, all countries. They do have a presence of business programs. They have programs on economy. But it is important to learn best practices in ecology, in economy, and we need to talk about communication platforms, which will help us to do so.
Thank you. Daniel, please. Daniel, can I ask you comments?
Okay, yes. I think to build briefly on the point I was talking about before is, and it ties in with what Dr. Cavallo was saying about the fiscal pressures. I mean, I think we need to expand the domestic revenue base, but I think it can be done in such a way that it is pro-investment and helps countries create a positive, hospitable investment. Make the headlines about Amazon and Google or about a big international oil company. But what we really need to look at is how can we have hospitable policies that will convert the shadow economy into the legitimate economy. That's your tax base. To get those people in, paying some minimal amount of income tax and also participating with the consumption tax system. So I think we need to look, and you think about the fastest growing economies in the world, which are in Africa. And we need to welcome, you take countries like Ghana or Tanzania or Uganda, who can be modeled after Kazakhstan. And how can you make a VAT work? How can you make a very modest and reasonable income tax work? So I think we think about, hospitable and welcoming fiscal policies that will help convert the shadow economy to the legal economy. And I'm a firm believer that taxation is a country's most important trade policy. And again, as we go back to the plan articulated by President Nazarbayev, that he wants to see Kazakhstan by 2050 in the top 30 most developed countries of the world. Well, it's going to be, these are the horses that are going to bring Kazakhstan across that finish line. So I think those are the points. How do we bring the shadow economy from the dark into the legal sector? How do we continue to welcome investment, not just the sexy foreign stuff, but the domestic investors? And then also, it's not polite to talk about it, but we like to, it's transparency of tax administrations, which really gets to the point of getting rid of corruption or reducing corruption so more money goes into the treasury. And again, we like to have the headlines about transparency on mining companies and oil companies, but we also need to keep the spotlight focused on transparency and honesty of tax and customs administrations. Thank you.
Thank you. Did I miss anyone here? Because
yeah, hi. Thanks so much. I think the paper is very interesting. I just want to echo a couple comments that I've heard and a couple of suggestions about the paper. The first, there's the section about the Millennium Development Goals. I think it misses sort of the more updated conversation that's been going on around the next round of the Millennium Development Goals. And I think it could be stronger if it referenced the fact there's been sort of about 6 months of discussion that reflects the response to what's called the high-level panel of eminent persons. I don't know who comes up with these long titles, but if you Google it, there was a paper that came out, I think, June 1 of 2013 that talks about here we put a group of smart people together, convened by David Cameron, the Prime Minister of Indonesia, and I think it may have been the head of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf of Liberia, to look at what the next round of MDGs should look at. As you rightfully said, there were 8 goals. They sort of said, keep the 8 and let's add 2 or 3 more, some of which have come up in this conversation already. And so I think you might want to reference that. And I also think some of the progress that has been made, frankly, much of the progress has been made in places like India and China and a couple of other countries, mainly because of the economic growth that's happened in those countries since the beginning of the MDGs in the year 2000. But so that's the first thing, is you might just kind of revisit the MDG section and kind of reflect sort of that more updated conversation. The other is there's some language in there in one of the other sections about the business enabling environment. I actually think it would be specifically helpful if you had some language about the doing business indicators. I think it reflects Mr. Witt's comments about formality and participating in the formal economy. I know certainly Russia is very supportive of the doing business indicators. Not every country I think Sweden is. I know France is less enthusiastic about it, and I'm not sure where Kazakhstan is on the doing business indicators. But it just seems to me that most of the countries that are members of the World Bank Group have found these to be very powerful conversation starter, and you might want to specifically reference them and how you're going to leverage the doing business indicators for the formality. Just a couple other things. I've skimmed this a couple times. I haven't seen the word corruption in the document, and I know it was referenced earlier. You might want to specifically have some language about not just global governance. There's several sections about the refining the global governance and the Bretton Woods institutions, and I think those are all fine. But I think specifically the driver of governance, I think it goes back to my earlier point about the next round of the MDGs. There's a strong push among many governments to include a new good governance goal, which could encompass rule of law, transparency, anti-corruption in it. And so I actually think you might want to have some language about good governance and anti-corruption in there. And then just 2 other points. Something about, again, Mr. Witt's comment about taxation. This is not a sexy topic, but it's going to get a lot more emphasis and focus in the international conversation over the next couple of years, because there's going to be a lot more tax revenue generated in developing countries than any of the foreign aid, whether through the Bretton Woods institutions or bilaterally. It's multiples and multiples of that. And so how tax regimes are set up, and some of the discussions about the finer points that have been described here, but just even in terms of things like improving the quality of audits and how you actually do tax collections. So there's the OECD has set up, I think it's called Tax Inspectors Without Borders. I mean, it's the least sexy thing you can think of, but it's going to be very, very important. And then finally, this issue of domestic resource mobilization, not just tax collections, but also sort of the enabling environment for leveraging domestic savings and domestic investment and pensions. To the extent that you reference that, I think this paper would be a little bit more in sync with some of the other global conversations that are going on. And I know that's a little bit of a dump, but I've been listening to the conversation. I wanted to respond to some of the comments that I've heard so far and just suggest a couple of things that might strengthen the paper. That's all I've got.
Thank you. So maybe before I give you the floor, maybe I can ask our colleagues here in the studio who have been working on the plan, maybe to skip speakers. Should we be specific about, should we talk about national issues here or more global? Please, Alex.
I completely agree with you. The point of the plan was not to take our local issues to the global level, because these problems are not relevant for some of the countries. These problems have already been solved for some of the countries, and we can only use the experience to solve them for ourselves. The point is to solve the global imbalances, to improve global coordination of macroeconomic policies, because as you know, one of the key issue that caused the last crisis was the uncoordinated global policy and uncoordinated financial regulation. So what we are trying to do is perhaps give some guidelines to improve coordination and give way for.
Well, let me go back to Sky. We have difficult time to reconcile something that people always say, you know, nation states and what national economic policy are doing. Are we facing the same problem as a global level where we are still talking about national policies where we should all be talking about the impact of new policy to the rest of the world and vice versa? So thinking more global. Your view, please.
Well, can I say a few words?
Please.
Well, I mean, this is basically unrealistic to ask other countries to take care of, you know, the countries that are in trouble. Because, you know, we are all selfish. We look at our own self-interest. And if some countries are going in trouble, we know the other countries haven't come to the help. They have made it even worse for these countries to get some benefits for themselves. This is a little bit, you know, it would be beautiful if the level of humanity come to that level to encourage everybody to be looking at the other people as their, you know, brothers and sisters and friends, and to work with them. But isn't this unrealistic to think that this global situation will come to the stage that everybody will be helping one another, not taking advantage of one another?
Yeah.
This is the question.
Yeah. Sergey, can I ask you maybe further comments?
Yes, thank you. Because we just, actually, I'm saying just, but it happened in 1991. We had big country, we have smaller countries now, independent countries, and some of them successful, some of them are not so successful. I think that solution is in the implementing best practices, but everybody understands these best practices in their own way. And from my point of view, what is essential is to be able to communicate these best practices, to have standards, either it's standards of living or of economical development. These standards should be widely accepted and agreed about, but then you have got commonly accepted sort of guidelines or commonly accepted the way of good and bad things. I'm talking about it in general terms, but the idea is that yes, we do need to learn from the best in terms of economical development countries, but everybody will find their own way. And I think that there is no one solution for everybody, to put it in short.
Okay, Philip Nobel?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah.
I believe that, yes, it would be utopia to believe that, unfortunately, this brother country will help out this brother country and so forth on a more realistic level. However, this forum is clearly a proof that the initiative is there, that the will is there, and so I believe that only by having initiated this forum, I think that we've already the steps have already been laid out. Now, I remember when the EU wanted to bail out Greece and so forth. I mean, I'm not sure though that it was really a big favor. That can be discussed. However, from a crisis point of view, our initiative must be directed from on a global scale, not only on a national scale. On that, I'm completely in agreement. So I suppose that we can, that's my point of view, at least. I mean, it can be defendable, but anyway.
Well, let me just interject briefly, if I may, Dan here, and I think this would be my final point. I think Kazakhstan natural resources have been a blessing, not a curse, as many of our friends wrongly state. So I think Kazakhstan, where you've come in 22 years, where you expect to go over the next 30 years is a model. And so I think we need to have a voice. We're not going to have a perfect document, but I think just doing this and then through our expert PR and communications people to make sure it's out there, that would be doing a service for from Argentina to Brazil to Cameroon and to Papua New Guinea. You're going to be providing a voice, and I think that together we can, we come from all around the world on this small group of experts. We can, we can provide the leadership, but it's a voice. So let's not get too carried away. We need to make sure that this voice is in the game. And I really like the comment from my colleague. I think he's my colleague from Washington, or because he, at least American, because he speaks just the way I do. We need to use the buzzwords. It's a bit annoying that we have to do that, but those are the global buzzwords of the IMF and the UN and the OECD. So again, from a communications perspective, let's use those buzzwords, but let's, by all means, ladies and gentlemen, make sure our voice is there.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yes. I understand very well the pessimism of Faramarz in terms of getting countries trying to help other countries. But the question, he's right, but the creation of international financial institutions and the World Trade Organization and the UN are attempts to create mechanisms to work together to try to solve particularly crisis and maybe to help individual countries to enhance growth possibilities. Now, the IMF, for example, did help Mexico in '95, together with the US government, to try to cope with the crisis. The same it happened with the IMF, Japan, and also the US and Europe tried to help the Asian nations at the time of the Asian crisis. That was good. And unfortunately, in our case, in Argentina in '91, the IMF and the US government, instead of helping Argentina, actually just abandoned us. Of course, there were very special circumstances, and that was very bad, not only for Argentina, that since then has reintroduced inflation and instability in its economy, but also to many other emerging countries that started to think that you will never get support if you go into a crisis. I think the experience of Europe, the recent experience of Europe, is much more encouraging, because even though the problem in Greece and in Spain and in Portugal and in Ireland was even the problem was larger than in Argentina in '91, no one of these countries followed the route that Argentina did of abandoning the use of hard currency and trying to reintroduce domestic currency very weak and currencies that the people would not trust. No, I am encouraged by the fact that the Europeans decided to preserve the euro system and to improve it, moving in the direction of a banking union and not only a monetary union. I think that is very, very encouraging. Now, even though it is difficult and though it is natural in a sense that each country should care about itself, I think that once to get the different nations and countries working together in international organizations and also in international conference or mechanism for international coordination like the G20, we could get some we could get improvement in terms of the global policies, and we could eventually design global policies. I think that a World Anti-Crisis Plan should focus on what kind of international cooperation mechanism we can encourage and propose, even though, as Paramarsi said, one has not to be too optimistic that you will get immediate and significant results, but over the medium and long term, that may be very good for humanity.
Thank you, Domingo. Well, thank you all of you very much for spending almost an hour with us here in Astana. I wanted, before we close and we summarize, to give maybe to our speakers here in the studio the final word. Murat, you want to say final thing, maybe the next step for the anti-crisis initiative before the May flagship conference?
First of all, dear participants, thank you very much on behalf of Eurasian Economic Club of Scientists, and of course all your proposals and comments will include all consolidated draft of World Anti-Crisis Plan. And of course, during we are going to develop and improve this World Anti-Crisis Plan project during next 2 months, and we invite all your colleagues to join us in order to develop this document. Thank you, and see you on the 7th Astana Economic Forum in Astana. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you again very much for all of you. Sorry?
Thank you. Forward.
Thank
Look
you.
forward.
Thank you very much.
As we said,
Bye-bye.
Thank you. I look forward to the summary from today's call, Danera, and thank you all, everyone in Astana, for your technical contribution to make this connection possible. And Domenico, I hope we can see each other. Let's swap some emails.
Yes, Dan. It will be a great pleasure for me.
Indeed.
Okay.
Indeed. Okay. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
thank you.
Thank you very much,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.